Okay, welcome to everybody, and thank you for being part of us today for our webinar entitled The Power of Accurate Data and Why Quality MLS Input Matters to Both Brokers and Appraisers. My name is Vic Knight. I am the chairman of the North Carolina Realtors Appraisal Committee, and we are covering this important issue today. I am an active real estate broker. I'm an active certified general appraiser, and this is my 42nd year in the appraisal business, as well as the brokerage business. You are going to receive a follow-up email in a couple of days, probably the first of next week at the latest. So I'm going to cover a couple of housekeeping issues as we head towards that related to these emails that you're going to receive. When you receive the email, within the email will be a brief survey asking for your constructive feedback from today's webinar. Second item is you're going to receive a link to the recording of this webinar. So this webinar is being recorded. You can go back and refresh your memory, take some additional notes and those sort of things if you prefer. Share it for that matter. The last one is you'll receive copies of the PowerPoint slides and other materials that are covered in today's webinar, just so everybody understands. If you have any questions during the webinar, the only way that you're going to be able to ask a question is at the bottom of your Zoom screen is the Q&A feature. If you click on the Q&A feature, it'll allow you an opportunity to type in a question. We'll follow those questions, try our best to answer those at the end of the webinar. But regardless of whether we get to your question today or not, we've already received a little over a dozen questions from other registrants in advance. We're going to answer all questions, including those that are asked today. It may be several days, well into next week, before we get all of that put together to get those questions answered, but we will answer those questions. Last thing I want to at least remind everybody is that we all use MLS, and we've experienced those circumstances where sometimes the MLS information isn't as complete as it could be. It isn't as accurate as it could be. That hinders our ability to put our respective CMAs together, our marketing materials together, our appraisals together. So the better the information, the more complete the information, the more accurate information, the better we can serve our customers and clients. I want you to remember that because I believe it's important to everybody. As we turn this discussion over to our panelists, I'm going to introduce these panelists in just a minute, but they're going to be focused on how to accurately enter MLS data. And that's not necessarily a methodology, it's just their version of what's important, getting that information in there, and support accurate for the supporting of accurate brokers, CMAs, and marketing materials, and certainly for the support to appraisers for a better appraisal outcome. And I know all brokers are interested in a more favorable outcome to that. So we're going to start by introducing these four panelists. The first panelist is Mr. Stacy Antheston. Stacy, I want to tell you thank you for being part of us today. Stacy is a certified residential appraiser. He is the editor-in-chief of the TAR report, www.tarreport.com. So thank you, Stacy, for doing that. He's been doing it for MLS here for years, and he is our resident MLS data geek. Thank you, Stacy. Second on our panelist is Miss Miriam Baird. I have known Miriam for a number of years and a longtime friend. Just to be frank about it, she really likes my wife more than she likes me, but she did agree to be part of us today. So thank you, Miriam, and privileged to have served with you as a real estate commissioner in the somewhat recent past. Third up is Mr. Matt Fowler. Matt is the CEO of Dorify MLS. Most of you would recognize being the previous Triangle MLS. Its name changed. The Dorify MLS is now serving well over 20 counties. I don't know the exact number, Matt, but I know it's well over that, and probably a couple of counties still in Virginia. He's a self-admitted real estate appraiser, and I'll call that a recovering appraiser. That's his words, not mine. He's the resident superhero data geek for MLS and all things knowledgeable about the Rizzo standards. I don't know whether to cover that or not. Last but not least, Mr. Doug King. Doug is from the western part of North Carolina, Hendersonville area. He's a certified residential appraiser and he's an active broker. About 25 years experience, and among many other things other than just the traditional appraisal aspects, he is a specialist in flood, disaster, and FEMA appraisals. I know you've been busy doing just that, Doug. An all-around good guy. Again, I want to thank all of you for being part of us today on our webinar. So as we focus a little bit towards that, I want to give you a little bit of reasons why we felt it was important to try and sponsor this webinar today. We've all experienced circumstances where we've been to MLS, looked up some various properties, and we realize there's just not as much information there as we would like. Incomplete, maybe inaccurate, who knows. It hinders our ability as brokers to develop our CMAs and to help our buyer clients as they make their buying decisions. But it also hinders the ability for some of us that are appraisers to develop more accurate appraisals and for a better outcome for all parties. Now, certainly we work for the lenders in many cases, but we all want to produce the best product for the outcome. And we rely as appraisers heavily on that information. Ultimately, we want more accurate MLS data, which leads to a smoother transaction and closings. Neither brokers or appraisers ever look at each one of these properties comps, meaning we don't actually get into them like you as the listing brokers did. So you got to realize you're telling the story on behalf of your client, your seller client. You're telling the story about this property. And the more accurate data you input into MLS, including photographs and documents and other kinds of things, it ultimately leads to a more smooth outcome. Benefits to everybody from telling that story. To that point, we want to get on with our actual panelist. And Stacy, I'm going to turn this over to you and how you believe brokers and appraisers benefit from more accurate MLS. Stacy, it's all yours. Thank you for being part of us today. So Stacy's getting his presentation up.
All right, Cody, we can see this, I'm assuming, yes?
Yes.
Well, I have a little subtitle here, the importance of correct data in MLS. Or do you really like talking to appraisers? Now, Vic and I do. I think Matt does, but we're not really a bunch of grumpy guys. We really are nice and warm and fuzzy to talk to. But we're going to see if we can help you out in terms of how we view data and what you can do to kind of cut down on emails and calls. All right, so accurate data fuels market insights. That's kind of a duh thing, right? It drives accurate market stats and reports, which in turn produce current market analysis, which is what we're all doing. You're, especially from the listing agent standpoint, you are analyzing markets and advising your sellers on that. That's in our appraiser DNA. We do that on every assignment that we show up with. Hey, in case you didn't know this, it supports automated valuation models. So if you think that Zillow and Redfin is garbage, well, a lot of what they're getting is from public records, and then they're supplementing that with MLS data. So it's important that they get that. And we all know how much the consumer really hangs their hat on the Zestimate and what Redfin says. So it helps agents, buyers, and sellers understand market conditions. That's key. Okay, so why does it matter to appraisers? Get a little geeky here. We have primary data sources and we have secondary data sources. Well, MLS is our primary data source. And I'll be telling you, we'd be lost without you. I think there's a country song in there, but I'm not going to sing it. It just is really, really important for us. I've talked to some people who either don't have access to data MLSs or their MLS is not very good. And they are really in data hunter and gathering mode, which is a lot of time. So we use MLS as our primary data source. We verify from the secondary data source, which is the tax office, broker, buyer, seller. Here's the thing that's come up. A lot of you may or may not be aware that when the loan goes to the Fannie system, it goes into this UAD data set. So Fannie gets all the appraisals are uploaded in there. And if there's a conflict between what we use as MLS, especially for lot size or square footage and what public records say, or what has appeared in a previous appraisal for which an appraiser has verified it but didn't go back to MLS to correct it, it's going to produce inconsistencies in appraisal reports and thus influence mortgage underwriting. And I'm pretty sure it's going to start sending out letters from Fannie to appraisers saying, why did you say this lot size was this big or this house was this big? I put garbage in, garbage out. Accurate listing information supports reliable adjustments. It's that simple. We are only as good as the data we get. We do a lot of relocation appraisals, and I go back and I check, and our supposed to be within 5% high or low. And the few times that I've missed it, I've looked back and my comps were terrible. And so it's the same thing with your um, when you're doing your CMAs. If you have good comps and you don't have good information, it's going to be tough to assist or counsel both your buyer and your seller. Correct reporting of concessions and financing terms is necessary. We want to understand the influence on sales price. Fannie has just gotten really anal about financing concessions and seller reported concessions from the financing side. So in our market, here in the Triangle, we've really cleaned up that field. It used to be a catch-all for like whatever you want to put in there. Now it's really a dollar amount. So it's really helpful for us to do that. But to put the amount in there is really important for us because what we're trying to do is we're trying to determine what the influence on sales price is. Here's another one that's important. Correct reporting of geographic markers. That's what I call them, either zip code or postal code, as we now call it, school district, subdivision. They're all necessary to determine market preferences. We know that certain zip codes, certain school districts, certain subdivisions carry market preferences, but in appraisal world, we have to prove it. And the only way that we can prove it is to construct data sets between the two to see if there is a preference. All right, I'm sure this is what you're hanging your hat on. How can we, listing agents, cut down on calls and emails? Floor plans, boy, we love them. And our MLS here has really gotten uh, some things that agents can do to put floor plans on there in an easier fashion, but it is really helpful for us to see those floor plans. Matter of fact, they were never, I've been doing this almost as long as Vic, and we never really ever had a floor plan. And then we started to get floor plans about 10 years ago. And we thought, wow, this is really impactful. So, and now when we see a listing that does not have a floor plan, we get a little grouchy. So we don't want the appraiser to be grouchy. Hey, a list of updates is great. Y'all are really good at putting pictures up there, but as you know, you can have those pictures reflect the house. It may or may not be actual, but a list of updates is really black and white, and it's something that we can go on. Once again, correct reporting of concessions and terms. I did not talk about multiple offers because that's really important from a comp standpoint because it's going to help us understand how that sales price was developed. Correct entering of room location. So this is big. We have different floor plans. We have floor plans with first floor master bedrooms, floor plans with second floor master bedrooms, floor plans with first floor and a guest bedroom. All those things are super impactful. I think we get too anal on square footage, both appraisers and agents, and and certainly homeowners. But you're not buying a box of square footage. You're buying square footage arrayed in a certain way. And those of you out here who've looked at listings and said that floor plan wouldn't work, I don't think anybody's ever said that square footage would not work for you. So it's really important for us to see where those room locations are because we can't construct data sets unless we know where those room locations are. And then the last bullet on this one is the correct designation of property amenities, townhouse and units. Once again, that's one of those things that can contribute to value, but if everybody puts townhouse in there, we can't do it. So we need that to have have that correctly entered. Foundation is a real tricky one in our market now. A slab can have contributory value, a crawl space can have contributory value. So we're trying to get that straightened out here. We talked about the primary bedroom location and also the rooms in the basements. Those of you in the Northeast and Midwest where basements are very prevalent, that is really usually reported. But down here, basements are still pretty rare amenity. But in order for us to determine contributory value, we need to know what the rooms are down there, whether it's kitchens, bedrooms, baths, pool table rooms, theaters, all that stuff. So we're trying to figure out what the contributory value of that basement was. So that's all I got. On to the next one.
Get my stuff turned on. Stacy, thank you for all that information. Obviously, the emphasis on floor plans and Photographs, room counts, those kind of things are ultimately very important. We'll get to some concession issues. Matt and I might discuss that a little bit, but thank you for bringing those points up. Miriam, I'd like for you to chat a little bit about how these particular attributes of these properties and disclosure of those things are important to our fellow brokers and appraisers. So I'm going to turn it all over to you. You ready?
Almost.
Okay.
Uh, I'm screen sharing, but I can't see my own screen.
Well, we're looking at your desktop screen at the moment.
Oh, really? Oh, well,
Yep.
that's a little frightening. How about now?
Now there you go. Just have to put it into share mode. Perfect. Thank you, Miriam.
You're welcome. Good thing we practiced, right? So, hi, everybody. I have a little presentation for you from the Real Estate Commission side of things, and it's going to start off with our tried and true topic, which is the duty to disclose material facts. You all know, I can't see you out there, but I know you know that this is a thing that the commission discusses time and time again in terms of broker responsibilities. And of course, it has an impact on what you put into the MLS. So just a quickie review here. Material facts from the commission's perspective includes pretty much any information that could affect a reasonable person's decision to buy or sell. And we put those facts in various buckets, primarily the property itself, what's going on there, the eternal question of square footage, number of bedrooms and bathrooms, these kinds of things, things that are often in the MLS, facts affecting the property. These would be things more like roadways going by, the dump that's down the road, zoning, school districts, those kinds of things. Facts about a principal's ability to perform, less impactful in an MLS discussion, but still a material fact from our point of view. And finally, facts known to be of special importance that you might not volunteer just every time, but if you know that your client has a special need or want or desire, you would bring that up. So in the MLS, material facts, I mean, it depends on how you look at it, but generally, I would say that most of what is in the MLS is likely going to be material. And I just threw up a list of common things here, including, the year built, the amenities, features, bedrooms, bathrooms, footage, all that stuff. If you asked me, must I include every single one of these things in the MLS in order to be in compliance with the commission's rules? I would have to say no, you don't. Some of these things you probably do. And as with all questions to the Real Estate Commission's legal staff, the answer is always, it depends. But I can say that accuracy in the MLS is critical, and the failure to be accurate in the MLS is a potential for a misrepresentation. Hence the note at the bottom, an error in the MLS is a misrepresentation. If we go to the ever-present question of square footage as an example, if you ask me, must I include the square footage of a property in the MLS? I would say no, but if you include it, it must be right. And the same would probably be true for many of these things. On the other hand, if you ask me, is it best practice to include square footage in the MLS? I would say absolutely. It's best practice. These are things that people want to know. And as a real estate broker, you have a duty to disclose the things that people would want to know that would affect their decision in buying or selling. You don't have to do it in the MLS, but in general, you need to do it somewhere. Um, so things that a buyer might want to know or should know would include any kind of defect, any kind of nearby construction that impacts the property, and the ability of the buyers to actually come to closing. So back to my original point, I would say disclosure in the MLS is not required, but it is the greatest place to disclose because it brings everything together in one setting. It gives you and your client, whether buyer or seller, a bird's eye view and documents for you that, yes, I did in fact disclose, and this is what I said. So it's a key place for documentation that you did your duty as a broker. We have, just in chatting with Vic and getting ready to put this program together, we talked about problems with entry of MLS data when you just put it in for comp purposes only. And my understanding of what happens is that sometimes brokers put incomplete or limited data into the MLS. For example, they just say the size, the price, the condition, and not a whole lot more. My concern about that from the commission side is that when you don't paint a complete picture, you may paint an inaccurate representation of the property. And this is a thing that brokers struggle with and the commission struggles with too in assessing complaints. But it's one thing to advocate for your client, say you're the listing agent. It's one thing to advocate for your client and say, hey, this is the property and to emphasize all its best features. As Vic said, you're telling a story, but at some point when the story becomes a fairy tale, then we at the commission have concerns. So the more that you put in, the better the accuracy of the representations that you are making about the property itself. And the less likely you are to have some kind of complaint that you omitted something that's really important. When you omit things from the MLS, you not only skew the data, as you've already heard from our first speaker, for the appraisers, you also skew the data for yourself. And I think he alluded to that as well. Whether you're a broker or an appraiser, you're using this data to compare properties and determine probable sales price. So if you're on the listing side, you're trying to figure out what's realistic and reasonable for your seller client. If you're on the buyer side, you're trying to compare properties 1, 2, 3 through however many you're looking at and see which one is going to best suit your buyer. I think it's just common sense that the more that's in there, the better you can whittle down what you need, whether it's that first floor primary bedroom that we talked about in the first presentation, that might be a key need for somebody. Maybe they have to have a particular number of bedrooms. Maybe they need a larger lot size. Maybe they need a fenced-in backyard. Doesn't really matter. People have specific things that they want, and a lot of that is addressed in the MLS because the MLS has grown up with all y'all and the practice that you have, and it includes, whatever it is you might need. So I'm going to close out by just reminding you that as a broker, you have a fiduciary duty to your client, and that includes many things, loyalty and accounting for money and all of that. But one of the primary fiduciary duties is that duty to disclose material facts. And as we've discussed, your MLS is a great tool for disclosure and provides you and your clients a comprehensive overview of all the things that might be material to your client in any given situation. And so that is it for me.
Well, thank you, Miriam. I really appreciate you sharing all that information with us. Super important, to say the least. And kind of in a summary, it's the material facts. It's the facts, the whole facts, and nothing but the facts. We said those things for many years and many of our mandatory update classes as others. But it reminds me of a saying that my grandmother had, and I kind of really coupling that with understanding the whole importance of disclosing material facts really solidified it in my mind a long time ago. And this little parable was there's no greater lie than telling half the truth. And the point happens to be is that if you don't disclose everything that you should disclose, have to disclose, those fiduciary duties requirement to disclose, then you might be not only misrepresenting, but certainly at a minimum unrepresenting the things that you need to represent in a transaction. So I think we hear you loud and clear about that, and I certainly thank you for sharing those things. I know that the ongoing conversation about the quote unquote for comp purposes only has been a real stickler, probably more so for appraisers than it has been for the brokers, but they have to follow up and call that listing broker or at least their office and get a little additional information if that's the best piece of information to use. So again, I just thank you for covering all those things for us, Miriam, as
My
always.
pleasure.
Yep. Next, we're going to have a little conversation with Matt Fowler. Matt, as I said, is the CEO of Dorify MLS, and he's going to talk about all kinds of MLS things and MLS rules a little bit. Thank you, Matt, for being part of us today.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. I really appreciate it. Hope you can hear me okay. I want to thank Vic and Stacy for serving on the new Dorify Appraisal Council that we just put together at Dorify. Um, they messed around at the Dorify Board of Directors and hired a recovering real estate appraiser as I identify myself. I was a general appraiser back in Alabama for 10 years. So I feel like I'm hanging out with my people today. You do have sort of a mole on the inside of the MLS for the first time maybe in a while, and we're getting to do some stuff that I think you'll like as appraisers. Dorify is a pretty big part of real estate in North Carolina. We're doing about $10 million an hour. Some of the stats that we are that 92% of the transactions that were in the $21 billion that we closed last year involved competing firms, which is a real statement to us about the value of the network effect, excuse me, of MLS in general. I've got 5 quick topics to talk about today. They're really all about data. We've made some big changes in how data is managed at Dorify. You know, you let an appraiser get their hands on the database and you see there's going to be consequences. We've just gotten started on some of them. I've been at the job for 4 years in December. Stacy has been a lot of help, actually. I got to meet Vic through part of the council, but we've got 5 quick things to talk about in terms of data in the MLS. You may see a little gray on my face, and I recognize that picture on the right. We printed MLS books when I started my first MLS software company, and the brokers really thought of it, many do maybe, as a stack of flyers, not dissimilar from those yard things that you get in the clear box at by the road. But I've sold an MLS before, and the valuation people taught us to talk about it as a digital media platform, not as a stack of flyers. It's a lot more than that. So we think a lot about data quality. We think a lot about transparency. And for the first time in a while, maybe we think a lot about how appraisers use this data. You were talking about above and below ground finished living a minute ago. We've recently had a meeting where we pulled up the Fannie form and looked at how that data really needs to be represented so we can capture it that way. That's a big change from the past. I did mention RESO before. That's the Real Estate Standards Organization. People generally roll their eyes back when I talk about RESO because it is actually a meeting of data geeks to talk about this stuff. I'll just point you to the wiki entry at reso.org, but it's the anecdote to garbage in, garbage out. And Status is a great example. One of the first meetings I went to at RESO back in the day, we collected status, what's in the drop-down list for status, active, contingent, pending, whatever, from 522 MLSs from around the country. And if you just add them all up to see how many options there are in there, there were 570. More than 400 of those options were present in only one city. So that's just garbage is what that is. So it's taken us years and a lot of work and 2 kind of inflection points during each year to get to a point where we now have this data dictionary that's in version 2.0. And if you have a question about the data that we capture or the data that you'd like to see in your local MLS, go out to the data dictionary and tell your local MLS that they're not coming up to national standards. We've made a lot of changes in the data in just the last couple of years. Another round of changes just went out July 22nd, where we've made another several dozen fields required and a bunch of other fields contingently required based on other selections, HOA, for example. We've got a long way to go. Parcel ID, for example, is present in 98% of our listings, but it's not masked. So you can type in see deed in the parcel number, and that's simply not good enough. Um, Seller concession remarks, for example, I checked before our call. 44% of those are null, and it's open text, so it says all sorts of stuff in there. The appraisal council has been working with us to come up with a way to clean that up. We did find out through our analysis that 50% of all sales are reporting a concession amount with a median of about $3,000. So what are we doing to try to make the data better? We're making those fields required. We're increasing the number of lookups. We're also adding in the next 90 days an artificial intelligence tool to help us add listings four times faster with 70% fewer errors using a tool that is really fancy autofill. For the realtors that are filling out this form, the one above there in the upper left with pages of checkboxes takes a long time, an average of 38 to 40 minutes when we time people. And this takes a fraction of the time with considerably more accuracy, as is demonstrated by our little animation there. It's a new product from a company called OcuCell. We'll be the second city in the country using that. In the future, we do have a vision for statewide data. We use the metaphor of the multiplex. Um, if you are doing appraisals across MLS boundaries and you have to be a member of more than one, and we know most of our brokers do, many of our appraisers do, what we're working on is a baby step towards data sharing. It's not a statewide MLS. I actually don't think that's a good idea, but it is a statewide data product from your local MLS that can give you one theater with all the movies in it. So if you want to watch 3 movies, you can buy 3 tickets and go watch 3 movies. The metaphor being if you work in 3 MLS coverage areas, you can pay for all 3, but instead of having to deal with the different systems, the inconsistent data, rules, reporting requirements, we'll give you one license, one feed, and one format. So that's coming soon. We have tentative agreements with Canopy and Hive. I'm talking about it out in the public because I'm prodding Steve Bird and Daniel a bit more to get our document signed. A little politics there for you. But that's my 8 minutes. And I'll plug an event we have coming up November 5th where NAR economist Lawrence Yun is coming to speak and carry. So thanks for having me today, Vic.
Thanks, Matt. We really appreciate that a lot. Very insightful about MLSs and what they're doing, not only locally in the Triangle, but obviously across the state and for that matter, even across the country, and how important that happens to be. You mentioned increasing the number of mandatory fields. Some people may like that, some people may not, but it is a cause and effect of more accurate information, more complete information in MLS. You touched on a couple of things though about the technology side, and obviously maybe some people say, well, you're forcing the technology on us, and other people may say, thank you for bringing it. But in both of those cases, you didn't mention this, but I'm a big advocate for training people. You know, I'm an old goat. I don't change easy. My wife down the hallway can tell you that. But the more training I get, I think I'm better for it, and I can serve my customers and clients better for it. So training, I think, is an important aspect of that as well. And the need to intentionally try and be more accurate in that input. But you did mention briefly about homeowner association input of information. And I think that's really important. I know that there are circumstances under which Miriam and the rest of the Real Estate Commission have said in the past that for those of us that live in homeowner association managed locations and we decide to sell our property, that buyer needs homeowner information. They need a copy of the balance sheet. They need a copy of the budget. They might need other things as well, but those are kind of the minimum things. And if we're not providing that, we need to step that platform up a little bit, and that's going to rest on the listing agent side. It's not going to come from any place else. So I think that's important, and I thank you for it. I know that all of us understand that MLS is the lifeblood of what we do as brokers and appraisers, and I'm hoping that everybody kind of looks at what they're doing on the listing side under the concept of right out of our code of ethics, the golden rule. Do unto others, you have others do unto you. If you're looking at something that's incomplete, you know that somebody didn't do it as complete as it could be, and they're not treating our fellow brokers and others the way they should. But thank you for all of that information. I think that's very, very helpful. I appreciate it a lot, Matt.
Thank you, Vic. I'll be around for questions later.
All righty. We are on to Doug King, our resident expert from the western part of North Carolina. Hey, Doug, appreciate you being part of us today. I'm going to turn this over to you and let you talk a little bit about those things, since you can wear two hats in this market. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. My wife reminds me of that all the time. So this is all about those things. Doug, it's all yours. Thank you, buddy.
Hey, thank you, Vic. I'm very honored to be a part of the podcast. Hope y'all find part of it beneficial to you. So early spring, I've been in discussion with Vic Knight, Mel Black, and others. We talked about the possibility of implementing more data about the concessions. Feel like that's a tool that impacts our sales that we haven't been using quite as much as we could. We know how important our listing data is, and as a group, we usually do a good job of that. A little bit extra post-closing data could be just as important to our next listing or our next closing. Those of us who remember the pre-due diligence days probably remember a time when buyers weren't demanding repairs and concessions or price negotiations all the way up until closing day. I'm waiting on that one buyer to call up and say there was a full roll of toilet paper in the master bath and it's gone now. We just don't know what the next one holds. As a realtor, I may not pay as much attention to concessions of closed sales in general, but as an appraiser, I try and read every comment and every line and adjust my sales grid appropriately. So just imagine if there's a new cookie cutter PUD down the block that was constructed in 2000 and completed in 2001. All the homes in Treeville Estates are basically alike, same builder and quality. Maybe some have fireplaces, one or two have garages, 25% have a view. How do we value and support adjustments? The answer is through match pair sales. But first, we must adjust for concessions. I'm going to make this pretty simple. We're going to talk about number 4 Elm Street, 6 Elm Street, and 8 Elm Street, and respectively. If realtor number 1 sells 4 Elm Street, which has a new roof, new HVAC, and it sells at listing price, realtor 2 sells 6 Elm Street and it sells $10,000 under asking price with no notes in the concession comments. Was it negotiations? Was it repairs found during due diligence? Did the home not appraise at listing price? Let's consider how much realtor 3 could use the additional data next month when he's listing at 8 Elm Street. So we often have the RPD to show what condition a lot of the components are in, but along with the age of the roof, age of appliances, etc. But those are filled out pre-listing, and a lot can change by the time the home closes. Can Realtor 3 benefit from knowing that the buyers of 6 Elm Street actually offered $5,000 over due diligence at $5,000 over list price, but reduced the contract price by $15,000 at due diligence due to roof damage and a failing HVAC that the home inspector found? How many appraisers that use closed sales for the next 12 months? I'll answer that. There's a lot of them going to be using it. Can the listing agent number 3 benefit from knowing the concessions of 6 Elm Street when the buyers of 8 Elm Street want to offer $10,000 below the sales price of 6 Elm Street? Since number 8 needs a roof per home inspection, that data supports no additional concessions are justified for the roof condition. Inputting more post-closing concessions data can help a listing agent and a homeowner when considering to renegotiate the contract price or due diligence price or due diligence request. By knowing what concessions and conditions impacted these closed sales that my home was comped out with, creates a more level playing field. Appraisers cannot share a report with anyone but the client. However, the seller can request a copy of the report if the buyers are demanding a renegotiation of the contract or term price. So appraisers love plan unit developments, cookie cutters, because it's a perfect market to do our match pairs and our paired sales analysis. The input of concessions is a prime element of the match pair analysis, and we use that to support adjustments in other reports every day. So what are and what are not concessions? In previous years, I recall a closed sale in our MLS, and it closed at 600,000 and listed 36,000 in concessions. As I'm scratching my head and dialing up this agent, I keep hearing Sesame Street play over and over in my head. 6 times 6 is 36. Could it be? Yep, they listed the 6% real estate commission as a concession. So to simply identify concessions, it's that amount that the seller contributed to the sale that is not represented in the sales price. 5,000 closing costs paid by a seller is a concession to note. Dropping the price 5,000 for a repair would already be seen in the sales price. But disclosing that also gives us more information. That new heat pump, carpet allowance, maybe the seller paid 2 points of the buyer's loan costs. Maybe the seller replaced the appliances at the request of the buyers. All that's going to help us when we are negotiating with our sellers and trying to decide, if these requests are justified or not. With cooperation from the local MLS boards, we can hopefully have more space to report these items and or dollar amounts when changing our listings to closed. Just a couple of lines explain the home didn't appraise, or buyer only purchased 2 of the 5 acres, or any other concession that was a condition or agreement of the sale is important. We appraisers see a different amount of property closing with less property than was advertised in the MLS, and there's no comments. Think of how much incorrect data could impact the market. A home of 5 acres selling 90,000 under list price with nothing about it being 2 acres and not 5. And you go and complete a BPO for a prospective seller in the same market and undervalue the home by 90,000. Reporting concessions of, say, $3,000 closing costs paid by sellers might be typical for your market and not require adjustments, but it still needs to be reported. Otherwise, how do we know what is typical? Some underwriters are adamant about adjusting for all concessions, and there again, they can argue that it's typical for the market or make adjustments and move forward. Reporting material facts discovered prior to closing when they impacted the sale can also be very important. Discuss list price versus sales price, multiple offers, motivated sellers. Was there a pre-listing home inspection done and defects uncovered? Did the seller have those repairs made prior to listing the property, or was it done under a due diligence request? It's all important data that we feel should be shared. So as my pastor says every Sunday, I'll land the plane now. We all know we should not report real estate commissions as a concession or anywhere else on the form. The forbidden reporting of real estate commissions will continue to be a gray area, and it would be great to discuss it, but I'll leave that up to someone else. I'll conclude with this question. What if sellers offered none but added 3% to a list or a contract price to pay a selling agent? How would we report that, or could we report it at all? Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks, Doug. I really appreciate your input and insightfulness, and giving some explanation to how not just appraisers but brokers have a genuine need for understanding what the actual final terms and conditions were under the actual selling and closing transfer of title, at the end of the effort to market these properties. So it helped for clarity's sake quite a bit. You did mention a couple things, particularly about the concessions and building that platform. I think Matt briefly talked about that related to some of the future Rizzo standards. All MLSs have their own set of rules and regulations. I think it's going to be some of the concession items are going to be pretty high priority for these MLSs in the real near term, near horizon, just because of what you said. It's going to be something that we need as appraisers for our reports. So it's obviously something we're going to need help from the listing brokers because the listing is theirs and they edit it and we don't. But that'll come about, I think, just because the market demand will. Ultimately, I think, kind of you said as a wrap up, we still just all need to operate under the golden rule. What's good for me is good for you. I need to be more diligent about inputting of information in MLS when we're starting the process as well as when we're concluding it. So thank you for those comments, Doug. I really do appreciate it a lot
Thank you for
for
having
your
me.
time and effort and expertise. At this point, we have about 15 minutes left, maybe a fraction less. Um, we talked a little bit about trying to answer some questions, and let's see, let me turn myself back on. We have now 8 questions in Q&A. I'm going to try and look at some of those and pull out 1 or 2 of these. As we started our efforts today in putting this seminar together, we received about a little over a dozen questions. I'm going to start with those as an example. Matt, I'm going to pick on you first, if you don't mind. There's a question that was proposed to us. The question was, and this has kind of been asked as I'm reading some of the questions, has been asked of what is the best way to challenge inaccurate data in MLS? So how
Mm.
are MLSs managing that process? Just a little bit.
Oh, I love that question. So it's called the Tattler button informally. Um, in all of our MLS interfaces, or I think all of them, there's a button that either says problem or challenge or report. And it pops up a little form that you fill out and tell us who that is. It's anonymous. We do know who it is, so we can tell you later if it's fixed, but it's not something that carries through to the offender. And as a recovering appraiser, I love the use of the Tadler button. I think it makes the whole network stronger. So much so that I've been talking to Stacy about it, about to start rewarding people for turning in reports of errors with like in-app rewards. That should be fun. But
Well,
there's a
Matt,
button. The short answer to your question is there's a button.
yeah. Let me turn my camera back on. Thanks for that insight. You mentioned to say that whether you said this or not, this is what my ears heard. All MLSs have something like this. Is that actually true, or everybody's now incorporating that?
No, I mean, I think all MLSs have that, not just Dorify. When I say all, I meant all the different platforms that we offer at Dorify, we offer 4. But in all of them, and in the MLS that you probably use back at home, whether it's Matrix or Flex or Navica, there's a report error somewhere that somebody at the MLS or association works on. We have 4 people in our data integrity department, an automated scanning tool that compares what's in the photos to what's reported in the listings to try and maximize the quality of the data.
Well, thanks again, Matt. I really appreciate the insightfulness and explanation. Miriam, I'm going to ask you a question, if you don't mind. This is one of our pre-asked questions. And generally speaking, the question is, please discuss the use of public information, such as tax records and other public information items that are input or not input into MLS, and how that affects the consuming side of the transaction.
Okay, great. I would say, I mean, in general, I would encourage brokers to use public information. There is a lot out there, and I think a responsible broker needs to know what is readily available at their fingertips, including the tax records, but often things related to zoning and planning, school districts, those kinds of things. There are all sorts of things that are available on the public record. DOT has been working on improving their website in terms of road construction, and that's another example. So, in general, I encourage, and the commission encourages brokers to know where these things are that are readily accessible and to use them to help them provide information to their clients. There's always a caveat, and it's funny how I keep coming back to square footage, but that's the big one, is that in general, it is known that the tax records of square footage are unreliable. So when a broker knows, and we would expect all brokers to know that tax records relating to square footage specifically are not reliable, that then the broker should not rely on those. That doesn't mean I would say that means all public records are not reliable. Not at all. There's a lot of really good data out there. But in general, it behooves a broker to know when there are things that you can't stand on and that you have to do yourselves. And the commission tries to help with that by providing information about things like square footage and reminding brokers that they need to measure that themselves. But in general, I would say use it and know what you've got, know your local community. And this is maybe delving too far off topic, but knowing your local community becomes more and more important as we have brokers who are trying to practice brokerage in a completely different area than the one in which they live. And so this is becoming a bit of a thing, and we just want to make sure that brokers have good competence in what's available about any particular community on the public record for that community.
Okay, well, thanks, Miriam. Let me ask you a question, and you didn't exactly touch on this, but from a material fact standpoint, and the adage is brokers need to disclose everything they know and everything they should know to all parties in the transaction. That should have known phrase is a thing that catches a lot of brokers, and sometimes it's off guard. It's you and I've talked about well, that's common knowledge. Well, that doesn't work. You can't just hide behind another phrase. But the things that brokers should know are all in public records for the most part, like how to get copies of building permits, how to get copies of inspection permits, how to get copies of whether their CO was issued, how to get a copy of the of septic permits, how to get a copy of a deed, how to get a copy of a plat. I mean, all those things are the things you mentioned that are part of public records and are easily, I think, for the most part, pretty obtainable in all 100 counties. Some of them may be more robust than others, but that's the kind of thing that you're talking about of what's available
That's
among
right.
many other
And
things.
and that's right. And yet, and I agree in general with everything you just said. And there are exceptions to everything you just said. There's counties where there was a fire and you
Oh,
can't
yeah.
get the public records between X and Y date. Or title, sure, you can get the deed, but do we expect our broker licensees to do a title search? No, we don't.
Yeah.
So the difficulty is just as we discuss this, it's like, okay, how far is required and how far is great practice and how far is an unreasonable expectation? And that's why I can never answer a question with anything except it depends.
Mhm.
Because what we do at the commission, if we got a complaint and you were the complainant, Vic, and you said, look, it's easy, just go to the public record and it's right there, we would do exactly that. We might go to the Register of Deeds in that for that county, or we might go to the building permit database for that county and look it up. And if we can get it in 2 seconds, then we think, okay, the broker should have been able to get it in 2 seconds. And if we find that it's a rabbit hole and you have to talk to Susie and she's been on vacation for the last year and a half, and then you have to go in person, there are a million things that might impact this whole process. And so it's one of the things that makes our jobs a little arduous from time to time. But that's what we look at. How reasonable is it for the broker to get that data?
Yeah. I didn't count the number of times you used this word, but I'm going to tell you a short story. The word is reasonable. Had a conversation when I was serving at the State Bar's Board of Specialization, and the conversation was about this word reasonable. And at that moment, literally in the lobby, comes walking Paul Newby down the hallway, and somebody in the room said, "Go ask him. He'll tell you what reasonable means." So, for those that don't understand, Paul Newby is the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, and I followed him down the hallway and had this conversation with him, and he said point blank, as he leaned over his desk a little bit and said, "If you really want to know what reasonable is, come stand in front of me in front of the court and I'll tell you." The point being is reasonable is a broad has a broad definition, particularly in the brokerage world. So you have to prudently apply that is what's reasonable. And it might not be Vic's definition of reasonable. It might be everybody that's also in the brokerage business wanting reasonable information, whatever that is. So thank you, Miriam. I really appreciate it as always. Stacy, I got a question for you real quick. Had a conversation in this little chat part, and I wrote it down. Need a little explanation on how to properly disclose main level, lower level, and upper level criteria in the MLS. What can you say for us in a couple of minutes?
Well, so I guess basement's the easiest one, but then you get into like, does a split level have a basement? Does a split floor have a basement? You know, it really gets, that's where it gets to be a challenge. The easy stuff is what floor is the primary bedroom on. That's kind of the one that in doing market research that has the most uh, impact on sales price, but we have to be able to construct data sets to do that. Um, the other thing, in terms of getting those floor locations right, there's a distinct difference in market appeal for floor plans that have a first floor master and a guest bedroom and guest bath. But so you have to put that in the room location so we know exactly where that is. Other than that, like the third floor, what's up on the third floor, that's should be self-explanatory in terms of doing that. I think that's really, the rooms that are down in the basement, it's important to know that. I think sometimes there's a tendency to chunk everything in, but as we appraisers know, and the agents know this as well, in a perfect world, the buyer would love to have all their square footage on first floor. They don't want to have to walk up and down any stairs. But so yes, those are ranch houses. But when you get the more levels, so basement, first floor, second floor, third floor, there's a distinct difference in contributory value for each of those floors. So that's why it's really important to have that information in there. And y'all brought up those for comp purposes only. Those really get me going when I see those, because you're right. They basically just have street address, sales price, sales date, and maybe some square footage on there. But there's such a lack of information on there that it's not really anything that we can use a lot of times.
Well,
Well,
thank you, Stacy. That
we're
helps.
working on it, Stacy. I hear you,
Okay.
buddy.
Yeah. Well, not Matt. Thank you for doing what you're doing at Dorify, but you and others need to spread the word that some of the other MLSs need to do the same like kind activities and stuff. And I know you know how to tell that in a very diplomatic way, as opposed to Vic saying it. I'm not known for that. Um, we only have another literally minute or so. Doug, I'm not trying to cut you short, but I do want to say to everybody, thank you for your participation. I really appreciate your expertise and your background and your thought and efforts that you put into helping us put this webinar on. It's been in the planning stages for a few months. Give everybody enough time. But kind of as the reminder, we all use MLS. Brokers use it every day, probably multiple times a day. Appraisers use it every day. Probably appraisers use it into the evenings and the early hours of the morning as much as any others. So, Matt, you need to keep it up and running all the time. Um, but all of that, because we use it for our respective purposes, the better the data, the more complete the data, the more accurate the data, the better we can serve our clients and customers. I would contend, quite frankly, if you do all those things, then you won't have to go see Miss Miriam very often, if at all. So it is a good practice. Develop a checklist of how you input. Maybe your firm does that. Other basic ways of handling all those kinds of information. We are virtually out of time. I just want to again thank all of our panelists. I certainly want to thank our staff, Denise and Savannah, for helping us out. I'm looking at the Q&As at the bottom of the list. We will cover all of those and we'll get all of those answers back to you within the next week or so, fairly soon. Savannah, Denise, if there's anything else we need to do, please let us know. But otherwise, thank everybody for being part of us today. It's really appreciated, and I hope everybody took something away they can use on a daily basis. That's the end of it all. I'm going to take a picture of these things, hoping, Denise, you capture all of these questions that we got, 9 questions as well. It's 2 o'clock. And again, thanks to everybody for being part of us. We're signing off.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Vic.